Hi everyone, this is William from the Headphone Experience. I'm here tonight with my review of the Venture Electronics Megatron. This is a USB DAC amp, and it was loaned to me for review by Venture Electronics. This currently sells for $50 and this is not a portable device. It's not a portable headphone amp DAC because it does not have an internal battery. What this does is it actually acts more like a dongle. So it's sort of a really big heavy-duty dongle with a lot of power. So anyway, and I did want to show you, it does come with a little short USB cable. This is USB-C to USB-C, and that's what this uses on the back, and also comes with an adapter to go from USB-C up to full-size USB. So basically when this is plugged in, basically you have a USB dongle. Like I said, no internal battery. I'll give you a closer look at it in a minute. Anyway, this has one digital input, and that would be USB Type-C, and it has three headphone outputs. It has a 3.5 millimeter single-ended output, a 2.5 millimeter balanced output, and a 4.4 millimeter balanced output. And this uses a DAC. The DAC chip is an ESS 9018K2M, and this unit supports PCM signals up to 24 bits and 96 kilohertz. Weighs in at 156 grams according to Venture Electronics. I forgot to actually weigh it on my scale, but it's actually pretty light. I don't think it's any heavier than that. The size is 76 millimeters wide, 110 millimeters deep, and 22 millimeters tall, which works out to about, I'd say about 2.5 inches wide by about 4 inches deep, and probably about 3/4, a little bit more tall. The power output is rated by Venture Electronics at 170 milliwatts into 32 ohms from the single-ended output, and 300 milliwatts into 32 ohms from the balanced outputs. I'll move in a little closer here and give you a look at this. And on the front, you can see you've got your 3.5 millimeter headphone output, which is single-ended. You've got your 4.4 millimeter balanced and your 2.5 millimeter balanced. And then on the back, you've actually you got a toggle switch here, and what that is for is next to it there's a 3.5 millimeter output, and you can actually use this as a standalone DAC. So you run your USB into this, and then you hook a 3.5 millimeter connection from this to an amp and switch this to the up position, and now you're using the internal DAC without actually using the amp. In the down position, this becomes a headphone amp. You've got two USB ports on the back here. The one here is for your data input. That's your line from your computer or tablet or whatever. And then the other is for charging, and I was a little bit confused about that. Why does it have a charging port if it does not have an internal battery? Well, it turns out the reason is because of the output power being so high from this. It's possible your phone or whatever you use, possibly your tablet, is not going to have enough power to power this, so you can actually run a second USB cable to this, to the charging port, and power it at the same time you're using it. And so you can plug in, get another USB cable, plug it into USB charger, and hook it up to the charging port of this while you're playing through it from the data port. And if there is excess power, if there's power left over, it will actually put that back in your phone or whatever, or your tablet, and charge your tablet. It does not come with the second cable. It comes with the one, And like I said, it's USB-C to USB-C, so I could hook this directly to my Android tablet, or with the adapter I can hook this directly to my HP desktop computer. So anyway, in my review of this unit, I tried this with several different headphones, I guess about 6 headphones. And starting with the Philips SHP 9500, the Grotto SR80E, the Hi-Fi Man Sundara, the Hi-Fi Man Edition XS, the Hi-Fi Man HE400 SE, which is a very hard to drive headphone, requires a lot of power, and the Hi-Fi Man HE560, which is even harder yet. It's probably the hardest headphone I have as far as needing power. Both of those, the 400 SE, HE, and the HE560, will challenge a lot of desktop amps and most portable devices, because they both will play loud enough without enough power, but they both lose sound quality if they don't have enough current coming into them. And I just recently got the HE400 SE, and it's even more noticeable with that headphone. When that headphone is not getting enough current, the bass just pretty much disappears. I mean, it just loses its bass, and the little bit that's left is muddy, and it's not tight, and it lacks impact, it lacks dynamics. So those are very good headphones for testing the power output of an amp. As far as comparing this, excuse me just a second. Primarily compared this to the Hi-Fi Dac, which you can see sitting on my desk behind me. And I really like the Hi-Fi Dac enough so that I bought it instead of returning it. And last year, or maybe 2 years in a row, I actually rated it my favorite my favorite budget combination DAC and amp. The only difference is, or the big difference is the Hi-Fi does have a volume control where this does not. So you're going to have to use a volume control from your computer or whatever your source is to control the volume of this unit, where the Hi-Fi, it has its own volume control, and it also has a bass boost on it. But that is single-ended amp balance, the same as this, being both single-ended amp balance. So anyway, I did want to mention that the first thing I realized when I first tried this out, and I hooked it up to the USB port of my HP desktop computer, and if you look at the instructions that Venture Electronics supplies, I didn't actually get them in the box with this, but I had to look them up. But there is a warning telling you to turn your volume on your source down to 0 before plugging your headphones in, and then work it up slowly. And I found that to be very true and very important, because my every other desktop amp DAC combination that I've tried, when I hooked it up to my HP desktop computer, I've set the master volume of the computer at 100%, and then I usually use the Windows 10 media player to play CDs that I rip to my computer, and I usually set the volume of that at 100%. So this Zendac right now, when I use that, both volume settings on my computer, the master volume and the media player volume, are set to 100%, and then I use the volume control to control the volume of my headphones, and that has worked out fine. Also, I don't think you can see it right now, it's down in front, I've got the Burson Conductor 3 reference, which is a combination amp DAC, and I've got that set up exactly the same way. I've got it set, both volume controls set at 100%, and then control the volume with the volume knob, and that works out fine. And I think every USB DAC that I've used up to this point, it's been the same thing. Both volume controls set at 100%. Well, I found out if I set my master control on my computer at 100%, even with hard to drive headphones like the HE400 SE and the HE560, I was setting the media player volume at like really low numbers, like 11%, 12%, somewhere like that, and it was really touchy. So what I ended up doing is I went back and I reset the master volume of the computer down to 50%, and that gave me a lot better results and less touchy volume control. So for all of the rest of the review here, I have the master volume on my computer, my HP laptop or desktop, set at 50%, and then I control the volume of my headphones with the volume control on the Windows 10 media player. So anyway, and I'll give you the results of that with different headphones in just a minute. So I wanted to start out by telling you what I thought of the sound of this, and I was actually very impressed. For a little $50 unit, I was actually kind of blown away by the sound. The sound is slightly on the warm side of neutral, which is similar to the i5 Zen Dac. I would consider that slightly on the warm side of neutral also. The sound is very clean and very detailed. I mean, this sounds like a quality amp and DAC. I mean, a quality desktop. The sound stage is very good. It's got good width. It's got decent depth. I did notice though, using the balanced output, I do get a little more width and a little bit more size to the sound stage compared to the 3.5 millimeter single-ended output. So what I came up with, using the different headphones, I wanted to tell you where I ended up with volume. To get a proper volume, I'll start out with the Hi-Fi Man Sundara. Using the 3.5 millimeter output, I was at a comfortable volume with my media player volume set at 21 and at a loud volume with the media player set at 41. And once again, I had the master volume of the computer at only 50%. The Hi-Fi Man Edition XS is very similar and efficient to the Sundara, so I was at about the same place. And then from the 4.4 millimeter balanced output, I was at 11 on my volume control, 11% for a comfortable level and 21% for a loud level. And once again, there was a small sound improvement from the balanced output. A little bit larger sound stage, a little bit more three-dimensional sound, and I would say maybe, it's hard to tell, slightly more detailed, a little bit cleaner sound. Okay, the Hi-Fi Man HE400 SE, which is a very hard to drive headphone. It's a great headphone for the price at $109. It's outstanding, but it does need some serious power to drive. And I'll tell you right now, this little amp DAC did a very good job with it. From the single-ended output, I was using a volume setting of 40% for normal listening level and 75% for a loud listening level. And from the 4.4 millimeter balance headphone output, I was at a volume setting of 29% for normal listening and 48% for loud. The Hi-Fi Man HE560, which is equally hard to drive but a higher impedance. The HE400 SE is, I think, only 20 ohms, and the HE560 is about 50 or maybe 55 ohms, something like that. So it's actually a little bit harder to drive. I could only test that from the 3.5 millimeter output, and the reason why is the ear cups on the HE560. I have the second version or second edition. They are 2.5 millimeter plugs, and I do not have a balanced cable with 2.5 millimeter cups at the headphone end. So I was only able to test that headphone from the single-ended output, and I was at a volume of 42 at normal listening levels and 78 at loud listening levels. And once again, this amp did a very good job, even from the 3.5 millimeter output, of powering that headphone and made it sound really good. I was kind of blown away by that, because a lot of amps, a lot of much more expensive desktop amps have fallen short on powering that headphone. The Grotto SR80E, which is a much easier to drive headphone, I only tried that from the 3.5 millimeter output, because that only has a single cable to one ear cup. It is not a balanced headphone, and I was at a volume level of 11 at normal listening levels and 18% at loud listening levels. The Philips SHP 9500 from the 3.5 millimeter output, I was at 13% at normal listening levels, 21% at loud listening levels. And then I tested my most efficient headphone of all. And the reason I did that is this amp is recommended for inefficient, hard to drive headphones, either high impedance headphones or planar magnetic headphones that need a lot of current. It is not recommended for sensitive headphones. So I was assuming that if I hooked a sensitive headphone up to it, I was going to hear background hiss. But even with the Grotto SR80 and the Philips SHP 9500, I heard absolutely no background hiss. Even if I put my media player on pause and put the volume all the way up to 100%, I still heard no hiss. So I decided to get out my most efficient headphone that I use to test the background noise of amps, and that would be the Sony MDR V700. It's like a 20-year-old DJ headphone, extremely efficient, some like 112 decibels at 1 milliwatt, and it's actually more efficient than most IEMs. Okay, if an amp has any background hiss, I'm going to hear it with that headphone. So I plugged that headphone in, and listening to music, I was only from the 3.5 millimeter output, I only had the volume at 5% for a normal listening level, and at 8% it was loud, and at 10% it was very loud. Okay, so I paused my media player, turned the volume all the way up to 100%, and still heard no hiss from that headphone. So hiss is not the issue. It's just that this thing has so much power, so much gain, that with a real sensitive headphone, the volume is very touchy. It's hard to control the volume. So I think that's the reason for the recommendation for using harder to drive headphones, because this thing is not putting out any hiss. So anyway, comparing this to the Zen Dac that's behind me, and like I said, was so impressed with the Zen Dac that I bought it for a reference budget DAC amp. And compared to that, comparing the 3.5 millimeter single-ended output of the Megatron to the 3.5 millimeter output of the Zen Dac, with most headphones, I would say this sounded as good or possibly even better than the Zen Dac, except for the Hi-Fi Man HE400 SE. It actually sounded significantly better from the Megatron than it did from the single-ended output of the Zen Dac. And the reason why is the Zen Dac with the HE400 SE from the single-ended output, I think it's running out of power. It's running out of current, and the bass starts at louder volumes. The bass starts losing impact and starts losing weight, where this actually, at louder volumes, does a better job with that headphone than the Zen Dac. It actually has more weight to the bass and better control to the bass. So actually, With the HE560, it didn't make as much of a difference, but with the 400 SE, I actually preferred this to the Zen Dac. And the Zen Dac, that is the original Zen Dac. I did want to point that out. It sold for about $129. There is a newer version, which I think is $189 now. I think it has a little bit more power, but as far as comparing to the original version, which I've had that, I don't know, maybe a year and a half or so, I actually, with the Hard to Drive SE 400 SE from Hi-Fi Man, actually thought that this did a better job than the Zen Dac. From the 4.4 millimeter balanced outputs, comparing this to the Zen Dac, it was closer. It was they actually sounded pretty close. But in my opinion, this sounded every bit as good as the Zen Dac, and with a few of the headphones, I think, especially the HE560, no, not the HE560, I don't have balanced input for that, but the HE400, probably even the Hi-Fi Man Edition XS, I actually thought that this sounded slightly better, so I mean, this thing is very impressive. It doesn't have a volume knob, so you got to control your volume from your source, which is kind of a hassle, and it doesn't have a battery, so you can't use it as a portable. But for a really decent amp for a hard to drive headphone like the HE400 SE or the HE560 from Hi-Fi Man, I don't know how you could beat this as far as sound quality from a $50 DAC amp. I mean, it's just, like I said, it kind of blows me away that it does that well. So in that respect, if you need something, if you have a hard to drive headphone like one of the Hi-Fi Man planers, especially the 400 SE or the HE560, and you are on a tight budget, and you have a computer, a phone, a tablet, or whatever, this thing is, like I said, I don't see how it could be beat for that price. I did want to mention that I tried this with my Android tablet, and I will be honest, I have not used my Android tablet in quite a while. In fact, it took me a few minutes to even get it turned on because I couldn't remember the password to get into it. But once I did get into it, and I've got a bunch of music files on that, and I transferred them from my computer with an SD card, and it's CDs ripped at full lossless quality in, what do they call it, WAV. So it's CDs at full CD quality that I'm playing through that. And I hooked this up, and there was no issues with the two matching up. Right away, I got music out of this from my Android tablet, and I had to use the cable, the USB C to USB-C. I actually have a longer one, which made it easier. But anyway, it matched up right away. There was no problems getting it set up. It sounded really, really good. The only thing is, and this may be that I'm not very familiar with the Android tablet. I don't use it that often. But as far as I can tell, it only has one volume adjustment that would be on the media player. And using the hard to drive HE400 SE, I was at like 90% on the volume, and an easier to drive headphone like the Grotto SR80, I was at like 60% at a comfortable volume. And I could actually get the HE400 SE up to a fairly loud volume by going to 100%. So I was just using the one volume control on the media. I don't know if there's a master volume or a system volume. I haven't used it in a long time, and I'm not that familiar with it. So there might be another volume control. Okay, what I did think was possible, because I read this information from Venture Electronics, that some phones and some tablets, portable devices don't have enough power to properly power this. So I thought that may be the problem. So I tried hooking up the second USB cable to the charging port on this to see if that made a difference. But for some reason, and I tried it several times, when I hooked that cable up to the charging port, it would kick my tablet out of USB mode, and it would play the music through the built-in speaker on the tablet. And I went into settings and tried to find a way to fix that, and I couldn't find it. And like I said, I'm not that familiar with the tablet. I don't use it that often. So that wasn't working out. It kept kicking the tablet into putting the sound out from the speaker instead of through the USB port into the Megatron. So I'm sure there's some way to fix that. I just don't know how to do it and didn't have the time to find it. So anyway, bottom line, if you have a hard to drive headphone like a planar magnetic from Hi-Fi Man, you need something on a very tight budget. We're talking $50 US here. An amp DAC, a good quality DAC, good quality, good sounding amp that has enough power to power those headphones. I don't see how you could beat this. So for those people, if that's what you need, I highly recommend this. So I'm going to wrap this up now. This is William from the Headphone Experience. If this video has helped you, please give me a thumbs up. Please subscribe to my YouTube channel, and the Headphone Experience on Facebook is up to almost 17.2 thousand members. We've been growing really fast lately, so you're all welcome over there. And once again, thanks for watching my video.